the behavior that occurred in a lethal way, suicide cases, to the COVID-19. There were, at least in Italy, a few cases that were recorded as associated to the infection. We have just sent out a paper this morning from Australia to Lancet Psychiatry, calculating the possible outcome in terms of suicide in Australia, where the country clearly was affected, but not to the extent of northern Italy. There were approximately 100 victims in Australia. And despite that, clearly the highly suggestive situation, the fears, the economic impact, the unemployment, the reaction to quarantine and social distancing, all these distressing factors may well justify some worsening of previous condition or some nervous breakdown. And in fact, the Australian data, which are based only on Queensland data, are detecting a 5% increase compared to the previous average of 5 years in Queensland. You may say that 5% is not much, but clearly for those involved in suicide, just one death is more than enough. 5% means 80 cases of suicide for Queensland, which is substantial. Queensland is an area of the world where suicide, unfortunately, is pretty high. And so the sample can be enough to express some valid inference on what we are detecting. In Italy, or in northern Italy, basically, because northern Italy has been a disaster. There's been a real hecatomb so far. So we count officially more than 32,000 deaths. 32,000 is an average small city. So slept way after this virus, but more accurate figures may well speak for 70,000 deaths. So even this strong discrepancy will be justified after a while, probably when the pandemic will be over. And so it's difficult to associate numbers. We ran very few autopsies. Many people died in complete isolation. Many corpses were discovered after days and days after death. And this is a very tragic phenomenon. And probably even in Slovenia, you have heard of many people watching television, the long lines of trucks, of military trucks, carrying coffins, the people, and this has been tragic. It's been tragic particularly for our older adults, people who normally are used to have as the only company the television, and watching these television images all the day has been terrible. It's been really a disaster, a tragedy in the tragedy. And so, and people ended in cemeteries located outside their places of residence. The relatives were also looking for the identification of corpses, which has been terrible, like in a war. And so there is a number of corpses not even identified still today. And even yesterday we had 170 deaths. So it's very soon to say these are the reaction, this is what will happen. From past Monday, 70% of commercial and industrial business reopened. So it's just 2 days now that you can see more traffic, more people on the streets, on the roads, but busy. Still, we need certification for doing things, so we are not free. And still there is a 30% of businesses and companies which have no permission to get opened. And so it's still a very disturbing situation. And clearly, for example, I understood that you mentioned the Leo Fund, the foundation, and we set up immediately a dedicated line for COVID people, for people affected by the condition, but for people fearing to be affected by the condition, especially for people feeling too lonely and left alone because of the social distancing, people who had disabilities, people with mental disorders, people who had carers. Italy, for example, among its many peculiarities, has also this phenomenon that we call the badanti. So the badanti are carers coming from Eastern European countries, and many of them don't have a regular contract. So they were assisting the older adults, elderly people, and they couldn't do it because they could be intercepted by police checks, and these people were left alone basically. And so nobody checked on their condition, nobody checked if their regular therapy, I mean not just the psychiatric therapy, but the anti-hypertension therapy, cardiovascular disorder, controlling diabetes, or all the routine therapy for people was not checked after. And if you don't cite well, or if you don't remember where you put your things, and if you need some motion around the environment where you live, and you are inhabilitated by some physical impairment, then it gets very difficult for you to stand it. And so it's really tough time, unprecedented and tough time.
Yes, I think things that you have mentioned are very relevant, not only for Italy, but also for Slovenia, because the restrictions were not so strong as in Italy, but still we were facing social isolation. And of course, I think this fears that were put out in the public, that we don't know what will happen and the worst can happen. I think that is something that actually the whole world probably knows by now. So I think what you were saying, that you have put together a special line for this kind of problems, is also something that we did in the Slovenian Psychologists Association with other partners. And so I wanted to maybe draw attention to this lines, and because the majority of people on this call or in this webinar is actually coming from this kind of helplines. And I want to maybe ask first, if we focus on the skills that people need to work on this kind of lines, what would be the skills that you would emphasize? What would be things that you would say, what is necessary for the listener to have?
You mean what type of answer we need to be prepared to give to people if they ring?
Yes, but
it depends on the type of request they make or the type of problem they present.
Maybe first I would just ask about what were your ideas about the skills, particular skills that the listeners need to have a good conversation.
Oh, you mean what sort of, not only of motivation, but what should be the features, the characteristics of people to make them a good listener on a helpline? Yes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, first of all, motivation. That's the minimum requirement. So you need to really wanting to help people, and decide to be generous, to gift your time, attention, and expertise to people. And on a helpline, you don't see the people. So they are either by phone or a chat. And so you miss the gesture, the expression, the faces. And so it requires an extra effort in a way, because you don't see the reaction, you don't see what they are doing. So you may fear their reaction and behavior while you're talking to them. So you need to be prepared from this basic point of view. Then one characteristic that is my modest experience is particularly with people in the psychological domain, so people having psychological problems or psychiatric problems, or even worse than that, suicidal ideation. So you don't have to be judgmental, and you have to create an interaction with the person, which in my experience is probably the most difficult thing to teach to people. How to create an interaction on the phone. So how to make the phone call progressing and continuing to a productive level. Well, productivity is measured by the help you are able to produce in people, and which is also difficult to measure because you don't see it happening. You may pick it up after a conversation and the way the conversation is run in general, and maybe you can ask for an outcome at the end of the phone call. Do you believe that you spent some good time? Do you feel it was useful? Did that help you in any way? Or why don't you call me again if you wanted? So these sorts of things are the end result or a possible checkpoint for what has happened during a conversation over the phone. However, as I said, in my experience, it's difficult to overcome the first 3 or 4 minutes in the conversation, because this is where the people decide if you're okay on the phone, if they rang the right number, or if you are useless. For example, people don't like too professional people. So if you are robotic in your answer, if you are too perfect, they don't like it. And I must tell you that at the beginning of my progression into suicide studies, I believe that really a milestone was hearing a recording session, an experience more than a session, from a person that was meant to drop himself from the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. He rang that emergency phone, and all phone calls were recorded, and it was the American Association of Suicidology at the time that was assisting with the service. And I vividly remember this phone call in which a person rang, and a gentle woman answered, "How may I help you, sir?" And this person got cranky, very irritated by the very professional voice that answered. And he started shouting and say, "I don't want a fake person, I want a real one." You know, I'm despair. What do you think I'm needing? I'm just throwing myself out of the gate. So this is an example of how important is the human touch also through a phone, which doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be warm, but certainly you need to be empathetic. And this being empathetic is something that needs to transpire through the phone call, because if you are too cold, if you don't talk, if you let it go, which you must at some level, but if you never intervene, people think that they are attending to a psychoanalyst, that they don't like it. They want someone interactive. And clearly, particularly if the person is very troubled, in a way, the interaction needs to be a bit more sophisticated, because if you dare something that is inappropriate, some comment, some word that maybe comes natural to you, but is not perceived in a friendly way, is perceived as judgmental or hostile or distancing, then you have finished with your help and your call. So there are a variety of characteristics, and look, I always thought that the help through the phone is a very significant type of help. In my career, I helped with the tele emergency phone service when I was younger than you, which you're very young, but when I was 30, I tried to put together a service that is still existing, and it has been copied and replicated in many parts of the world, which makes me feel a bit proud of that. But it was not the emergency service that was important. It was more important the active outreach of people. So calling the people who are alone or with disability or very old and with poor mobility, very frail, and so very needy, and make company and asking these people simply what they needed, what they hoped for, what were their basic requirements for the day, and etc. It made an enormous difference, because people may spend really all days without speaking a word in many cases, and so your presence and letting them know that you are out there ready to accept their phone call and to be there with them genuinely, because you don't want money, you don't have any advantage out of it, but you are donating your time. This is really very important. And also the level of volunteer works, it's important that people realize that, get informed that these people are generous people, and they are doing because of their passion and dedication to the other. And especially in psychological health, the people are hesitant in interacting with you because they may think that you are looking for their money, especially in the session. And so you're not saying much, because anyway, you have the money of the session. And so they are not sure that you are really interested or even capable of helping them. On the phone, this is an advantage, because you are called by them and they know, which means that they need to be informed that no charge is out there in the phone call, and that the people you are connecting to are generous people, or people wanting to be generous. This is important.
I think that's a very yeah. It really brings the human perspective to the phone call, isn't it? The generosity, the empathetic part, the motivation. So it's really important that we stay a human behind the phone, so to say. But now I want to move maybe more to the calls that are probably the most difficult, or one of the most difficult ones, are the ones that where a person is suicidal. And before I ask you what do you do when the person is suicidal, I want to ask you if you could maybe bring some attention to, or some light into the fact, how do you assess suicidal behavior on the phone? So it's already difficult sometimes to assess it in a real session when you have a person there and you can see the person, but here on the phone you don't have these clues, non-verbal clues are missing maybe, or at least some. So how can you, what would be your suggestions? How do you assess suicidal behavior in a good way, and how do you distinguish it from manipulation? That is a very common question that we get.
I need to be very frank with you and the people who are eventually listening. We all hope that there is a scale or a questionnaire that is magic and that is the good one and gives you the right prediction. It doesn't exist. So there are many questionnaires and many approaches to potentially suicidal people. But please don't believe that there is a series of questions that give you security or guarantee of anything, that your diagnosis, let's call it this way, or evaluation of risk is the right one. So having said that, I don't want to discourage anyone, but what needs to be clarified is that it's very difficult to assess suicidality. It can be even more difficult on the phone, where you have all the possible portfolio of human behaviors, but people normally can call you because you may be the last ring of a chain of opportunities, and all previously went broken, and you may be the last chance they have, and so they try even you, not knowing you, not knowing who is on the other side of the phone, and maybe they know the association or the NGOs running the service, and this line can have some reputation, which is also important on the other hand. But for a potential helper, what is most important is to be able to create an interaction on the phone, as I said before, and this interaction needs to give you, or should be designed to give you, the most elements which are possible. As in a normal session, I mean, as in a normal meeting with someone, there is a factor that has a load which is heavier than any other, and is previous suicidal behavior. So this is the most important risk factor for further suicidal behavior. And so you need to try to get information on previous behavior. Have you harmed yourself previously? Did you make any attempt at ending your life prematurely? And then more difficult questions. Have you been hospitalized? Did you go to emergency department for that? Were you accompanied by someone? Was your life in danger? What happened? What have you done before? Have you overdosed on some medication? Did you cut yourself Did you try to hang yourself, or were you running across highways? Were you looking to trains, but not because they're beautiful, because of the track, and things of this kind? So you need to end this kind of investigation after you have created some liaison with your person. You cannot start your phone call by saying, "Did you ever attempted suicide, sir?" Answer, yes, no, I don't know. You can't. So you have to be able to create some relationship over the phone or even on a chat, and you succeed in that. And this is important. How do you feel now? What are your feelings? Is there something that disappoints you or have disappointed you? And are you suffering for these things? To what point are you suffering? And so I'm probably saying a number of things as a psychologist, you know very well, but my intention is to clarify this point that there are no magic bullets for these, and that there is no perfect questionnaires. There is plenty of literature that says that self-evaluation, self-assessment by the patient is at least equal, if not superior, to any questionnaire in predicting suicide. And so at the end, the most important question would be, if this is true, and in my experience this is true, at the end the question is, are you thinking to die something bad to you? Are you thinking to end your life? Do you think that life is not worth living anymore? So this kind of question is a very straightforward question, and again, you have to have created, before posing this question, a relationship with the person. You cannot abruptly commence by this question or investigating suicide risk factors, etc. So there must be the opportunity to let the people express themselves, setting the scene, which is their emotional scene, so what they are living. And if they rang you as first, or did they contact already other people? And are they ringing you because they can ring you, for example, anytime during the day, instead of waiting to be visited the day after or after? So is it an emergency call? Is it a call during the night because you wanted to talk? You have something to express, you have something very strong inside yourself, and these feelings are not amenable to any control from yourself. And so you need to express them and to confront someone on those feelings, and know what another person may share with you on this level. So it's a particular setting, and clearly emergency calls can be very different from people asking you for some advice, for some support, or fighting loneliness or whatever. And the emergency call is another cup of tea. The emergency call is someone having, for example, a pistol in front of themselves and saying, look, I don't know if I finish this phone call because I have my gun here and I'll shoot myself right now. And then what do you say? You say, probably I can't interact with you with a gun in front of you. Can you please move your gun to another room and then come back and let me continue with you in some way? It makes me feel very anxious to have your gun. And so interaction of this time, these are legitimate, And this is possible. And if you say that it makes you feel anxious, you remind the person that you're just a human being, which is important in the relationship. Now I've forgotten your question. I don't know if I'm answering to what you were asking.
I think that we went the right direction. Maybe I'll come back with one part of my question, but one part you answered about the assessment. But I want to just maybe continue where you left off. So what if there is a caller who says, I don't know, I have a date and I want to commit suicide, or I want to die because of suicide on, I don't know, 1st of June, or I don't know, in 5 days or something like that. So in which direction do you go? How would you do a conversation like that?
Well, this situation happens quite frequently, actually. So the people that has a kind of anniversary or a fixed date, and they have decided, but clearly if they ring you, there is still some ambivalence with regard to that. So they have fixed a date, but they would like to negotiate this day. And clearly they have to find someone that is able to be a good negotiator. So give me a hint, give me a possibility to postpone the date, give me a possibility of creating some hope. Because at the end of the day, if we are looking for saving lives, what we are trying to identify is the level of hope that people have. This is also very important, like scouting for previous suicide behavior. What is life for you tomorrow? So how life can change? What if? What are the possibilities? What should happen to make you feel different? So it's important to see if there is any future for these people. In my experience, the most tragic situations are with people that have cancer, for example. And or even these previous days, the past days, with some elderly person, they say to you, I have COVID. I don't want to go to hospital. Why? Because there is no cure. There is no therapy. Everybody says, and everybody knows that there are no good therapies for COVID-19. So why should I go there to be intubated, to made unconscious, and then not to see anymore my people, my relative, my beloved person, etc. So I want to die in my bed and avoiding useless suffering. And the same holds true with some cancer patients, particularly those who are well aware that their destiny is done. And they are not terminally ill. Don't get confused on that point. They are not terminally ill, but they have a prognosis which has no escape. So these people are still in relatively good health conditions, apart from cancer, and they have full mobility, a full decisional power. And maybe they have means, they can drive, they can buy things, etc. And these people are quite, if not very, difficult to interact with and to convince to remain alive. So if you consider this aspect, particularly for well-educated people, those people that don't believe in miracles, don't believe in science that can be sparse in some American location or with some particular scientist seen through the internet, but these people are really difficult. And the key is the hope. So these people believe that there is absolutely no hope for them. And what we have to do is to see if there is some hope for people. So we have to work for giving some sense of worthiness in belonging again, in continuing, in not feeling taken apart, and that your destiny is over there and there is nothing to do. So that's the point. Again, your question was?
No, you answered my question. I mean, of course, we would like to hear from you some magic words, you know, how do you give back the hope to a person like that? But I'm not sure that even with your experiences, you have those 3 magic words, 5 magic words that we can use in a color, with a color like that.
I don't think there are magic words, of course, but there is a magic presence. And you may give the sense to a person that you are real, you exist, and your presence is there. You are an expert in bereavement, don't you? And so you know very well that the most important thing is to let the people know that you are there. You don't have to say anything special, but you have to give the sensation, if not the conviction, that you are there for them. And there are no advantages for you for being there or to take anything out of them, but you are genuinely there. And again, with a caller, you need to show that you are really available. The problem is if people start to steal your time in excess. So if the call never ends, and if people stay for 1 hour or more on the phone, it happens. And you need to gain the ability to end the phone call in a proper way. And most often, the way to end the call properly is to give the opportunity for another call. So you can ring me again, and people may say to you, oh, we will not be there, so there will be somewhere else. Okay, you can say, if this is the case, and if life is in danger, you can call me on Friday. I'll be here in the afternoon. Same time, same person. That's reassuring. That's a tie. That's a liaison. And this is acceptable in my view. Not everybody thinks this way, but look, that's my character. And so I'll be open to this possibility. Imagine that you have your husband or your Tara that is calling for you, and you say, look, I have to close now because I need to go. How come? How is possible? Oh, look, my husband is calling, we need to go out, and then I kill you, or I kill myself, or I wait for you outside because I know where your agency is located. And this is another problem, for example, and for helplines in general, or for many colleagues doing this job and in difficult situations. So as you probably are aware, there are colleagues that don't want their picture to be exposed, don't interact with people through the internet, don't unveil their location, and etc. So you need to be comfortable with your work. You need to do it with passion, and to do so, you need to be comfortable with the setting you have chosen, the clientele you have chosen, the help you want to offer. Don't offer anything you cannot offer. Don't promise nothing or anything that you can offer, really, or you don't have it. That would be a terrible mistake. So these are probably the basics, but these are important, especially when situations are critical.
In some of this, in creating this special line at our Slovene Psychologists Association, there was also a possibility that we actually forward the call to a psychiatrist. So most of the people on the line are psychologists, and you know, the idea was that if there's someone very suicidal, there could be a psychiatrist involved. What would be your point of view on that? I mean, because you were mentioning here very this person-to-person contact that you create on the call. Would that make sense, or would that create just another layer of for the caller to talk again with someone and possibly maybe feel even rejected if, you know, now this person couldn't handle me, now they're forwarding the call? What would be your thoughts?
The principle is still the same. Before ending with such a suggestion, you need to have created some relationship. You cannot say to people, you're crazy, ring a psychiatrist, because it's not my cup of tea. So you need to have created some relationship if you think that you can be useful, because at the end of the day, what counts most is the sensation that you're doing something useful. And so you are dedicating your time over the phone because you think you can donate something to people, your attention, your knowledge, your big or small expertise, but you're there to help. So if you are not judgmental, and if you realize that the person needs something above your level in some way, admittedly, psychiatrists are physicians and they are above your level, which is not granted, but this is a different situation. They can prescribe medication or hospitalize. So this is something that as a psychologist you cannot do. Well, you have to introduce that, maybe starting from the past, like you did for suicidal behavior. Have you been followed by someone before? Is anyone taking care? Are you taking any medication by chance? And who gave this medication? Was your GP? Was under the suggestion of a friend? Was a friend who is a pharmacist that has indicated that? And then do you think that psychiatric help would be interesting, useful for you? Because if you don't sleep, for example, you cannot be in good condition. Sleep is incredibly important and is your natural medicine, your first medicine. So if you don't sleep enough, you will aggravate every possible problem, and everything becomes acute or more acute because you have no energies left, or your level of judgment can be obnubilated, for example. So starting with the previous ties that you have established may introduce in a proper way also the recommendation of asking further to your help, which is there, which is important. You can have my time and my attention plus the help of someone else, and then this facilitate this kind of passage. But you don't have to give the impression that you want to get rid of this person, because this would be terrible. It's like being denied or being avoided.
Exactly. So here comes maybe this last part that I want to address, and I'm also aware of the timing. I just want to highlight also the self-care of people who are on the helplines. So what would be your suggestions? How do you face the fears of somebody taking their own life, or maybe even having an experience of, somebody committing or dying because of suicide. It means an unsuccessful talk that you had. How do you deal with this kind of situations?
So how you have the sensation that your phone call went badly?
For example,
is that
yes.
what you mean?
Yes, for example.
And how can you be supported by? You need to share with colleagues, and you need to be, of course, supervised by someone. So we run, for example, the Leo Fund as a weekly meeting of people, and beginners have a training that is supervised. All phone calls are recorded. There is a script of every phone call. So the script is limited to the basic characteristics because they remain as a record for people. There are no names, but people understand from profiles. But for you, the caller of an unfortunate phone call, there must be the support of your colleagues, and we all make mistakes. The important thing that we did our best, because we shouldn't have regrets in the sense that we didn't do enough, that we took the wrong direction, that you express something that was not, for example, appropriate to the situation. You made a bad comment. And sometimes on the phone, just one word can be enough to break the line. And so you need to be particularly careful. I remember Brian Mishara, who is a bit older than me, teaching me say the minimum, just because you limit the possibility of making mistakes. Correct, of course, this is a mathematical model, but you need also to build up a relationship. So it can be good as an aphorism to say the less, to be less wrong, or least wrong, but clearly you have to create a relationship. And if you made some mistake, or if despite your efforts it didn't go too well, then you need to have the support of your colleagues. That's absolutely a requirement for you.
Definitely. So I think, if I'm mindful of time, we talked for an hour now, and I would maybe suggest that we open up the line for some questions to the listeners, so that we don't, I'm sure that we couldn't go on for a longer time, but I think it's only fair, and people have the possibilities to now address their own concerns directly. So
with pleasure. What shall I do, or what do I have to do?
I think we need to let people talk, and I think our colleague will take over. Yes.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for this insightful conversation. I'm convinced that many of the questions that arose during providing psychological support over helplines were answered during this conversation. But as it always is, I'm sure some new questions sprung to mind among our audience. So I invite you to pose any questions. Just to repeat myself in Slovenian, torej, če ima kdo kakršnokoli vprašanje, vabljeni, da jih postavite. S veseljem tudi prevedemo vprašanje v angleščino, da bo lahko potem tudi profesor Delejo odgovoril.
Sorry, I'm not hearing too well. You made me a question, Matej?
No. I was just I was speaking in Slovenian, and I was saying
right. Okay,
yes,
okay. Go on.
Yes. That if there are any questions that people would like to ask in Slovenian, that we can translate them. That was,
okay, thank you.
Yes.
Now I'm hearing.
Okay, there was one technical question I can see, and it was whether there's going to be a recording available online. And yes, we will process the video, maybe add some subtitles. I was thinking, maybe not. We'll see. But definitely, the conversation will be published online, and the link will be shared with all of you that yeah, signed up for this webinar. Okay. Yes, with subtitles. Okay. And now we have the first question. Diana asks, are there any statistics on how much helplines are successful in preventing suicidal attempts?
No, not that I'm aware. We think, I'm convinced that we are successful in helping people, but figures are outside this world, I believe in that, even because you don't have follow-ups in general, so you don't have evaluation, and the very prediction of suicide is difficult to oppose to figures, because you should suicide is a rare phenomenon, too frequent from an emotional point of view, but too infrequent from a statistical point of view, and so every longitudinal evaluation is doomed to provide no clear data. And particularly with helpline, we try to develop helplines as much as we can, because the key issue is loneliness, and people who feel alone, that nobody is there to help them, or if there is help, it is costly and it requires appointments. So helplines are there. They are for free, and they are in general made up of people who are willing to help. So they need to be developed as much as we can. But having said that, unfortunately, I cannot answer in the numerical dimension that I was requested to, and I believe that nobody can do it.
Thank you.
There is.
Yes,
I can see the request.
Yeah.
And
okay. Just go.
Is there any? The question is there any difference between talking to a youngster or an adult, or maybe even a senior? And there is a lot of difference. And the difference, in my view, is getting even bigger with the time, because a younger generation, the very young generation, are particularly different from the young people of before. They talk in a rapid way. They are not used to express emotions. They are not used to talk much with you. And I had, even if I'm not a pediatrician or a doctor for particularly young people, but it happens to me to have under care a few very young patients. And one surprised me, a boy 17 years old. He asked me for a book to learn the word to say to the girl. And can you suggest me a good book where I can learn the word to be said by my young lover? And clearly I was very surprised by this request. But the reality is that text messages are not real words. and people are getting not very much used anymore to say words. And this is the same on visits, and on the phone is the same. They are rarely oriented towards the elaboration of the motions. They would like to have clear pictures of what needs to be done or where to go for finding solutions. And many people ask for example, which is quite new, for good programs on the internet. So, for example, many phone calls to the foundation are by young people asking, tell me about Mood Gym. Is it true that it's good? And you say, Mood Gym, what is this? And you don't know it. It's the best program for depression. And where is it? It's on the internet. It's for free, and it has a number of sessions, and you go through. But people are say, no, Mood Gym, it's no value. So there are these other programs, and again, which means they are not wanting to interact with you. They prefer to interact with a neutral means they can control and do it when they want. And they are used to behaving this way. So there is not anymore the timing from 8 in the morning to 5 or 6 p.m. There is a time that can extend all the time, whenever you want, whenever you're connected, whenever you want to be connected, and you have to have a quick answer. If you are not reacting, probably you're not good. You're not prompt, you're not apt. So I need something quicker. I don't care if it's an avatar, but it's quicker, immediate at my hand, not at your hands.
Great. Okay, so maybe I can translate the next question because it's in Slovenian language. I hope I'll do it justice. Since a large portion of the work over helplines is with regular patients, I presume mental health patients with mental illnesses. I am interested in your opinion and maybe some experiences or suggestions on how to approach and assess suicidal callers who have, for example, because of brain injuries or some other diseases, reduce impulse control or judgment. So if I paraphrase, it's a question regarding callers that have some mental impairments in terms of impulse control or judgment because of their pre-existing injuries or diseases. Okay. Was I clear?
Okay, I'm not sure. So the question is, what is the type of communication with the mentally impaired or injured people if they are affected by COVID?
No, I think it's suicidal people that have impulse control, reduced impulse control or judgment. So it's basically how to assess, how to convene with suicidal callers that have some illnesses or injuries that result in reduced impulse control and reduced judgment.
So what about those people who have poor impulse control and who are suicidal? Is correct? Can I summarize like that?
I think that is okay. Vita, well, I think that is it is reduced a bit, but I think that is the essence of the question, more or less.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, it's probably the case of young or very young people, because let's say the progression in life of people with very poor impulse control is very miserable in general. So it may happen that you have people who are young people who have antisocial behavior, impulsive control, opposing behavior, or type of behavior that are difficult to control, like hyperactive, attention deficit disorder, all that aura of people. These are not frequent callers, and not in my personal experience. And these people are in general acting a lot, and so their how can I say, mentalization can be very quick. They can be even very clever, very bright people, but impulsivity is very strong, and normally creates very many difficulties in establishing a relationship. So I can imagine that they may even start a telephone communication, but they may interrupt it and call it again and again, and then it is not a satisfactory level of communication, and it gives frustration and sense that nothing has ended in the proper way. So it's a very peculiar situation, the one requested by this person, but I believe it's quite difficult to have a client or a person calling you under these conditions, if I understood the condition properly, clearly. I recently visited two very young individuals with very severe impulse controls, and I believe that in one case, a boy aged 11, even the police intervened, because it was not possible to keep it in the waiting room, this person, and he was shouting, screaming, damaging objects, etc. And so imagining a phone call to a helpline made by these people that maybe swear at you, be very offending as well, and being it's very difficult. I'm sorry for not being satisfactory in the answer, but this is the mental climate that I'm making myself right now for these people. Maybe I have difficulties in visualizing the person that this colleague is referring to, but I don't think he's a frequent caller.
Okay. Okay, I think in case there is a need to further discuss this question, I invite the person who posted it to turn on the microphone, maybe, or just write it in Slovenian in the chat, and we can then delve in deeper. But in the meantime, we have a couple of questions,
Masha,
that are pretty similar, and yes, I think you can read one. Well, you can see the one from Masha. Yes. So the question is there any way to know if someone is really suicidal, or if he or she only threatening to gain something, for example, attention from their family or hospital care?
There could be, in the sense that if you are able to create a good history of the patient while you are on the phone, if you have the capability of creating that atmosphere that transforms the phone call into a possibility for a relationship with the caller, then you grab the previous suicidal behavior or the present intention. But in the meantime, you may also investigate who are the people interacting with the caller. And so what are the tensions existing in the environment of the caller? Is there a relationship issue with someone? Is there a family tension in the life of this person? And clearly, people may want to gain attention as the person who is making this question is outlining. Yes, clearly. There is also something that I neglected to indicate before, that quite often the people on the phone are in a way theatrically oriented. I mean, they are mimicking a situation or a description just to taste your capability. And it may happen that they are pretending having a situation just to listen what would be your reaction, and making a kind of IQ of the phone answerer, the helper. So it's a test. I'm now telling you a story and I want to see your reactions. Are silly things? Are they appropriate? It happens. Of course, it happens also in normal visits, but on the phone they are much more probable, because clearly you can't control the environment, you can't control the faces.
Great. Thank you for the answer.
I've seen the question, and it's a bit what we said before when we mentioned the presence. So you're not a musician, so you do what you can, and you may not have a solution for the person, a positive solution, but you may offer your help, your presence. So you are there to listen, you are there to probably examine with the person without giving suggestions, but examining and making the person give herself or himself a suggestion. You don't have to give suggestions, but you are there. And that's the most important thing. So the hope is actually knowing that there is the possibility for another phone call and for more phone calls if they want to. But maybe this is the only thing you can really make. And but it's important, it's something.
Great. Thank you very much for answering all these additional questions. I think that we are near the end. I would really like to thank you both for this great conversation. I'm very thankful for taking your time. Also, thanks to all the professionals that joined us and also provided us some with additional questions. As I've mentioned in the beginning, we're going to upload the video. We're going to add some subtitles and let you know where you can access the video once it is uploaded. So thank you on my behalf, and
thank you.
have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Hvala vam. Hvala vsem in vse dobro.
Bye.
Adijo.
Adios.